anything that I say now is not going to be like that was what was in my head at the time. If I say, well, I said I'm going to set goals and I'm going to sharpen and narrow my focus and I'm going to focus on what's right in front of me. That was not in my. But as I look back on the experience, I mean, that's what I was doing. I was, if the pain is high, I gotta get through. I can't really focus on much else. Let's get through this. Okay, maybe I need to hit that pain relief button a few times. It's giving me some relief, or whatever the case may be. Get to the next visitor. Try to sleep tonight. The nights were the worst by far. I mean, it's alone in the room. I mean, in the ICU, you are checked 24 times, a minimum, once every hour. The lights never go off. It's so hard to sleep. It's never quiet. You have to be checked every hour, 24 times a day. And eventually it was in an inpatient room where I had my own room. The lights would go out, actually be dark. Things were getting better, but you're not able to sleep and just laying there, just being so frustrated and facing the night and just, I can't get up. And all this stuff is going on. Mentally, it was tough that I just looked forward though to getting in a wheelchair. And then I knew about prosthetics and all of this stuff, but it's like, at an intuitive level, you don't really think about running until you've started crawling as a baby or something like this. There's a natural progression. And so for me, it was like to get into the wheelchair, and I am going to push around the hallways of this hospital. I'm going to be doing laps. I'm going to do 10 miles a day. I mean, it's kind of, that's what I was focused on. And I realized like that is a long ways away and I have no idea when it is, but it is going to happen. It's going to happen. And I want to get there. And I remember getting up out of bed for the first time and sitting up where my back wasn't touching the bed. And you're thinking, it's pretty easy to sit up. I have two people, one on either side of me, and they kind of gently let me go, but their hands were right there to catch me if I fell, and I fell. I couldn't even sit up unsupported. I had atrophied that much and balance. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be such a long road. I can't even sit up right now unassisted because weeks, maybe a couple months had gone by at that point. I'm going to walk on two prosthetic knees. This is going to be that could be discouraging and overwhelming if I ruminated on it too much, but it's like, okay, we're going to get in the wheelchair. Let's just get in the wheelchair. And I rigged up therapy bands around my bed. That could be some mobility and some exercise, but I think there's something here. Like whatever mobility you can do, you do it. You do it every day. You look forward to it. You do it. And there in that mobility is some psychological mobility that's movement too. Psychological momentum is developing and forward progress. And I think this is all tied together. At least it is for me. And I can say, I don't know what was going I can't remember exactly what was going in my head, but I can tell you two things. One, rig up some therapy bands around the scaffolding my bed, and let's do arm work every day. Number two, let's try to get in the wheelchair.
I like the fact that they were attainable and they weren't like super long term, even though it took you, like I think it was like you couldn't get out of bed for 100 days. You couldn't even roll over. I mean, that's insane, right? And like thinking about it. And, I think it was, you got out of that coma, like you had a tube down your throat. You couldn't even eat or drink anything, and you had this burning fever and you were, you had a mental reaction, I think, to the pain meds that you're on, which, gave you these horrible nightmares. And long-term thinking at that point is not an option, right? And a lot of times in civilian life, we are very wrapped up in long-term thinking when we should be more focused on those short-term goals, those short-term thinkings, like to get us to that long-term goal. And it's interesting because like, I'm sure for yourself, like looking back now and where you're at, and winning gold medals and finding, this new passion, cross skiing and stuff. How does it feel now, like looking back to where you've come to where you were? And also, what advice do you have for us to, long-term goals versus short-term goals to get to where you want to be? And were there ever goals where you had that you decided to shift, like, you set your sights on a goal for something and then was like, oh, I'm going to shift it to this new goal?
Sure. I remember thinking, I'm going to get my prosthetics eventually, and I'm going to get back to being in the SEAL team. I think people were telling me some unrealistic stuff about what amputees are doing. And certainly amputees had returned in the Special Operations Forces, amputees had returned. I knew about a SEAL captain who was a below knee amputee. Now, he's missing his leg is what I'm thinking, but in the detail of it, he's a below knee amputee. Somebody's telling me a Green Beret has gone back and redeployed to Iraq and isn't above the knee amputee. And wow, he's still got a good leg, but it's so, I was thinking I'm going to return. The prosthetics are good. The technology is awesome. I'm going to return. And then and that was a goal. I'm going to get back to being as operational as I can be. I would laugh at this, how delusional this was. But at the time, it meant something to me, and it was organic. You got to go with it, right? And so, but I eventually got to the part of my recovery where I was doing physical therapy. I got fitted for the prosthetic knees, and it was like day one, like as good as these could ever be. There will be nothing like the legs I used to have. And it would be completely selfish for me as a bilateral above knee amputee to try to return to the SEAL teams in an operational capacity. It's just not happening. Now I could stay in the community as a desk person, and I don't think I want to do that. But I was going through those machinations in my mind, and I started to set some new goals, because goals can get you moving forward. Long range goal, things that you really care about. Be powerful sources of motivation to get you through a setback. In this case, a major setback. And if I didn't have goals, it's like, what's the point of even moving forward? But I had these powerful goals that were in the future, and now they've shifted, and they become more about walking and running and becoming an athlete. I'm going to compete in some way. There's this thing called the Paralympics, and so starting to formulate these longer range goals. But then yet you got to kind of, okay, that's long ways out. Let's focus on, what's going on within a year, within 6 months, 3 months, 2 months. Let's try to work on physical therapy this week, and you're sharpening and narrowing the focus. When you say that companies are, I think if you're only in the short-term space and you don't have long-range goals, that can be a problem. Putting out fires every day and you not have make time to strategize and think about purpose and direction, that's a problem. But I think at its best, you develop strategy when things are calm, and in a clear-eyed way, you can think of a couple years out, 3, 4, 5 years out. And then in moments of stress, you kind of have to develop this capacity to micro focus, and that can really help you get through major crisis, and things settle down again, and you can reevaluate and see if after that crisis you need to redirect. And that's kind of how I see this. There's a tension between the long term and the short term, between the short term and the long term. But ideally, everything's in alignment.